Hello and welcome to The Big Fight. So the land acquisition bill, well, the new one, the amendment to the earlier bill, is now through in the Lok Sabha, but it is going to run into considered and considerable opposition in the Rajya Sabha. But this being one of the most contentious debates of our time, and something that lays down all sorts of major questions as to rights of farmer, rights of industry, what is the path that India should take, what is the role that the government should take, we thought it appropriate one more time to get some of the top experts in the field together to really try and understand once and for all what is at stake in the land acquisition bill. Is the new amended bill that the government has put out, will it eventually pass? Is it going to go to the select committee? And what should actually happen in this? So, as I said, a whole range of experts joining us on that. Sudhanshu Trivedi, spokesperson of the BJP, right here with us in the studio. It's great to have with us Mohammed Khan, who's an advocate, one of the people who, as in the capacity as OSG to Jairam Ramesh, was very crucially involved in drafting LARR 2013, the earlier bill. So he was really involved in the drafting of that and can shed some light on some of the finer points. Gardner Harris, South Asia correspondent of the New York Times, is with us. Jaiveer, Shergill, joining us from the Congress Party. MK Venu, Executive Editor, Amar Ujala Group. Great to have you with us. Jaiveer Jhakar is the chairman of the Bharat Krishak Samaj. Thanks for being with us. Sanjay Kumar is a professor at CSDS who's done a lot of studies actually as to what the farmers really seem to be wanting, because a lot of this is couched in this is good for farmers, bad for farmers. What is it that farmers want? You've done a study on this, so we'll get your views in. And we're being joined by Ajit Gulabchand, the Chairman MD of Hindustan Construction Company, and finally by Chengal Reddy, who's the Secretary General of the Consortium of Indian Farmers Association. So as I said, all experts are represented in some way or the other. Sudhanshu Trivedi, this seems to have become the first big battleground for the Modi government, and it's one on which in many cases it's a really tough battle to fight, because in a sense when the opposition is saying you're anti-farmer, that becomes a political hot potato. Also one of the reasons why Mohammed Khan's bill actually went through with almost complete majority. BJP itself supported it.
There are two aspects related to this. One is the intention of the government and of the Bharatiya Janata Party towards the interest of the farmers, and other is the ground realities of this land acquisition bill. As far as the intention is concerned, I would like to just go 2 or 3 sentences. It was our previous BJP government which brought down the interest rate on agricultural loan from whooping 14 to 18% to 8 to 9%.
Okay, that's general stuff. Let's just keep it to the LARR. Right. I mean, otherwise we get into an open-ended discussion on who's good or bad for farmers. Let's just keep it to the Land Acquisition Act.
And one more thing, the only Kisan credit card, the Kisan helpline, and also the Farmers Commission for the first time in the history. Then subsequent BJP government brought down the interest to 4% and to 0%.
Dhanshu, I will grant
now
you
I will come to in
farmers in
now
mind.
I am coming to this land acquisition bill.
Yeah.
As far as this bill is concerned, whatever the voices were raised cutting across the party line on 27th of June 2014, whether it was the Kerala government or the Karnataka government, UP government or the West Bengal government, on certain problems which are occurring in this land acquisition bill. For example, in rural infrastructure, for irrigation, if you are unable to acquire land for irrigation, for a school in a village or any other thing, which we tried to put out of that consent clause.
Yeah.
We have tried to add this. For example, in the defense purpose, there was a clause, we can acquire the land without consent clause, but only in case of urgency. For example, it means if there is a war, then only you can acquire the land. Otherwise, there will always be a legal proceeding. Why this urgency? If we want to have a nuclear warhead there, should we tell the entire world that we are going to have a nuclear warhead there? So, for defense purpose, we have done away with the word urgency. So
I get a lot of. I want to come to the specifics, because look, I get what you're saying, that there are certain areas that maybe the land acquisition, the previous bill went too far. Mohammed Khan, let me put that to you actually. A lot of people say that, look, where did this all start? You had the 1896 Land Acquisition Act, which was a completely obnoxious legislation, widely misused. Everyone was utilizing it to really rip off the farmers and take the land away from them at cheap prices and build it. So you needed to change that. There's a view that when your bill came about, it went too far in the other direction. So as a result, it became virtually impossible to acquire any land at all. And that, as Sudhanshu said, is also bad for the country. Would you think that's a fair criticism? Did you go too far?
Well, actually, first I'd like to begin by addressing something that Sudhanshu ji said. He's very right in pointing out that on the 27th of June, barely a month after the government was sworn in, they called a meeting of all the revenue ministers of various states. The agenda of this meeting was to find out what the problems with the implementation of the bill are. Now, we have just one concern at that point of time. The bill came into force in January of 2014, barely 6 months prior to this meeting being called, and it was never truly implemented because of the fact that the Model Code of Conduct came in, say, at the end of February. So, when you're calling a meeting of revenue ministers to gauge what are the challenges of implementing such a bill, our first question is, have you tried implementing it? What are these problems that have arisen when the bill could not legally have been implemented in the first place? So, to our mind, that meeting seemed as if it began with the agenda set from the very outset, right? I mean, the agenda wasn't how do we make the Land Acquisition Act better? It was what are the problems with the bill? Let's figure those out, right? And from that point onwards, we saw ground being laid towards the amendments that we saw brought in December of last year.
But did you go too far in the other direction?
We don't think so. In fact, we are criticized from one side of not going far enough. In fact, the original bill began with compensation set at 6 times the market value. We reduced it to 4. We had many more safeguards built into the Act earlier. We had a Secretary's Committee, but out of deference to the concerns raised by industry, we dropped the committee itself. So yes, this bill represents a grand compromise, actually, to our mind.
His point is you never even tried to implement that, the new bill.
How the bill has gone too far, I can just give you one example. The 80% or 70% consent clause. You know, after 30 years, we were able to get a clear majority government. From independence till today, no government was formed with more than 50% vote. So getting 50% is so difficult. So if you are putting a clause of 80%, it means you are virtually giving a position in which nothing can happen. And second thing, today we are living in the era of globalization. It's not just in India we have to get a piece of land. If you're not getting here, you name a single country in the world, whether developing or developed, which is having these type of clauses.
Let's say you want to let's say you want to make a defense facility somewhere, or you want to build a highway. It is not, or a dam. It's not necessary that
colony, if you want to get a legislation passed by 80% majority, I think everybody will agree that it will not go. Any group, if you are putting 80%, you are trying to get it too far. That's why I am saying it is too far.
Which Vikram indicated, the study which we did about acquiring land from the farmers. Farmers are willing to give you land if you want to build up school and hospitals. Yeah. Huge majority of farmers came up with this opinion that they are willing to give land. But if you say we want to build, high...
that's why this was the problem with the intentions of the previous government.
Which takes really the wind out of their sails. The statistic today, subject to creation, 67 projects are being held up, worth 4 lakh crore. Out of that, only 7 projects, big projects, are being held up because of acquisition problem. The ratio that this is causing is 87% to 13%.
Actually, yeah, Vikram, there's this false correlation, linking of economic growth with land acquisition, one-to-one. There is no one-to-one correlation. Economic growth slipped because of 100 other reasons, right? And the other point is what Sanjay was saying. Farmers are willing to give up land for projects, but there's a problem today is one of trust. The state in the past 20 to 30 years has not played an honest broker. The essential democratic principle of consent is very important because conceptually you can have aggressive capitalist growth and it will give you good economic 9-10% growth, but will it be socially inclusive? That's the other question. So these democratic institutions, these legislations are meant to temper growth so that it is more equitable. So, okay. That's the perspective in which you have to see it. I mean,
Gardner?
I mean, I think one of the depressing things about this is, of course, this Modi government has not really come up with very big bang reforms. Everything has been extremely modest. And this attempt to change... Well, no, I think that this is, frankly, a fairly modest effort to amend some things that I think a lot of the business community felt very concerned about in the land bill. And even this is getting caught up in very difficult politics and may not pass. So I think from the outsider's point of view...
From an outside point of view, you're saying it's important that this amendment must go through because at the end of the day, it becomes a signaling mechanism.
Absolutely.
Ajit Gulabchand, can I get you in on this?
There are about 300 billion or 30 crore new jobs to be created in the next 20 years. These are kids that are already born but will come into the job market every year, about 1.5 crores a year. So it's such a huge and gargantuan task to create those jobs. United States of America, the largest economy in the world, employs 13.5 crore or 135 million people, which means we have to create two America-sized economies to create these jobs. When you look at that enormity of that challenge, I think we should look at any of the rules and laws we made in the context of, can we get that kind of investment in and that many jobs created, for which we need infrastructure, we need a lot of manufacturing to come in, and other services as well. So when you look at the magnitude of the problem and the speed with which we have to do it, I think we are making a mistake in debating the wrong things for the time being. Second important thing, if we are so concerned about it, the right to property was removed. So we are discussing again property when you have removed right to property as a fundamental right. The constitution makers had made it a fundamental right, and it cannot be abrogated. Eminent domain exists even in a country like America, where you're allowed to shoot somebody who crosses your property. So in this case, you do need it. And government has done the right thing. In fact, it's not gone enough to make this bill workable. The bill in its existing form was unworkable any which way you see it. Okay. We wouldn't have got any development whatsoever.
What is it that farmers really want? Now, your study, which I did read in some detail, seemed to indicate that something like 76% of farmers said we don't want to farm anymore. And if that is the case, and that is what the majority of farmers really want, then Ajit's point becomes relevant, that you have to find ways of having manufacturing clusters, service clusters, other things in rural India. You can't then have all of these farmers who don't want to farm coming to the cities, being on footpaths or in slums, not knowing what to do and living in a state of poverty because they don't want to be farming anymore and there are no facilities in rural areas.
If you relate it to some of the other questions which we asked in the survey, they are not majority, huge majority of them don't want to get engaged or continue doing farming because the lack of infrastructure. They raise questions about seed, electricity, drinking water facility, and if I'm sure if such infrastructural facilities are provided to the existing farming community, I think this proportion of 70% not willing to do farming, not willing to be engaged in the farming, that would go down drastically. It's not that the majority of them, they don't want to.
It's a chicken and the egg situation. So, but now to provide those facilities, the government will no doubt argue that how do we provide those facilities without acquiring some land to provide those facilities? So that becomes.
But the whole debate is about whether when you acquire land for public utility purposes. In this survey, as I mentioned earlier also, about school, like hospitals, they are not worried. They are all willing to give you land.
That's not necessarily the case. And I'll tell you why that's not necessarily the case. Let's say you want to build a dam somewhere. Let's say you want to build something or a highway is going through. It may be good for society. But if you come to me individually and I'm a farmer, if you're saying I'm taking your land away to do something which is good for the neighborhood, I will say, no, I don't want you to do that. Please take his land away instead. So I agree with the project. Don't take my land away, take his land away. That is where the issue comes, where a private person may not be willing to make that sacrifice for a public good. That's where the issue is.
As a farmers organization, let me just say that UPA put the house on fire and BJP has added fuel to that fire by having all these acquisitions. As a farmer, there's no reason for the industry to acquire my land or the government to acquire my land. As a farmer, I will say that I'm willing to give my land at a fair price for a railway line, for a canal, for roads, for airport, for defense purposes and all those public utility purposes. I have no problem of giving the land, provided I have a fair compensation. But if you want to take my land away and give it to the industry, because the industry, see, like Ajit Gulabchandji said, in the US, if anybody walks onto your property, you can shoot him. He's quoting that as an example. But you walk into in India, you walk to a farmer's land and throw him out of his farm, and that he thinks is a good thing to do. I mean, it's ridiculous that, let me finish. It's ridiculous that the government should even enact a law where you can take a farmer's land without his consent. When you have over 200,000 hectares of land available with existing government institutions, public sector enterprises which is not used, why doesn't the government tabulate what it already has and give that to the industry first? Because no government organization, no public sector unit wants to give that land away. Everybody wants to sit on what they have. And I'm not in that 200,000 hectares, I'm not including railways land or the defense ministry's land. We have no issues about public utility acquisitions. We only have issues about giving it to the industry who just wants to make money.
So become today,
At our
government
expense.
acquiring for the private sector has no credibility today.
There were a couple of factors in Mohammed Khan's land bill which I would have thought the government would have been objecting to, which actually have not been objected to. There was actually a clause in there which says even if there's a private sale, if farmers, as you were saying, if an industry comes and says, I want to buy 200 acres, and you do a negotiated transaction between industry and farmers for 200 acres or 300 acres, what the 2013 LARR says is even that could come under the land acquisition bill, and that is something I've never quite understood. If it's a private, actually, why is it the case? If that's a private transaction, why do you have to get the land acquisition?
For over 100 acres.
Why should that be there at all?
When we were originally drafting the bill, it was very clear that many people, even during purchase, don't rehabilitate and resettle those displaced. Oftentimes, the landowners represent a very small fraction of the people who are actually dependent on that land for their livelihood. So, it was felt by almost all concerned that there should be a clause which does not give them compensation, but does give them resettlement and rehabilitation benefits. And the other thing,
if I can just take you up on that, if it's a willing transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller, why should you get the government into it?
Well, let me explain.
And then I'll ask Sudhanshu why he didn't amend this.
Let me explain it to you quickly why we did this. Firstly, now, the sale between X and Y is not affected by the R&R. The R&R is a contract between you and those who are displaced. These could be artisans, these could be, sharecroppers, etc. Now, why did we put it in the first place? Because there was a very, very large consensus that you must take care of these people as well, even if it's through private purchase. When we submitted the report to the standing committee, which was headed by Sumitra Mahajanji, rightfully pointed out that, look, you can't set these limits. Leave them to the states. Out of deference to the recommendation
given. It was the BJP who wanted this.
It was the BJP who asked us to leave the limits to the states.
The issue was really project-affected families. Now, it's not only issue about the landowner. It's about the labor working there, the people who are dependent upon the produce. Now, you might do a private sale. Overnight, those people who are dependent on that land, who are working, are displaced. Now, the owner doesn't take care of that.
Yeah, you're right, but one small point. This issue is not part of land acquisition. This can be taken care of in your social security welfare policies.
So you don't need it in the land acquisition.
You can look after your artisans through your social security schemes,
Sudhanshu, now this was, and the reason I'm asking this question very specifically is that after the 2013 Land Acquisition Act had come, if you were speaking to many people in private industry, and they were all saying what you are saying, that look, this is crazy, you can't proceed anymore. But if you ask them specifically what is it that you want done, they say, well, why don't you change this one clause for starters? If you're doing a private purchase, why is then the government getting down our neck? So this is an amendment which you could have perhaps made without the same sort of hue and cry as you're seeing now.
First, those who are opposing at least get this much of credit to BJP government that we took care of the concerns of the farmers. Second thing, what Shergill was saying. Let me complete.
You got a law which says no consent is required. Sorry,
let me complete the sentence.
That is right. There was political unanimity.
If you had taken a consent, then there was no law required.
Let me complete the sentence.
Entire opportunity to present your objection.
Consent is a fundamental issue.
What changed overnight?
That's why I am saying.
Sudhanshu, I am asking a simple question. What changed overnight that you changed your stance? Which mega project was being held up that you had to bring this ordinance?
I talk to these industrialists all the time, and from outside the United States, the Indian land situation is blindingly complicated, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is, and none of these guys talk about this, is that every land transaction that takes place in India has about half of it in black money.
No, sir.
If come on. Like, if you try to buy a house in India, people take boatloads
so that's why you can't do private transactions.
So you can't do private transactions, when you're sort of an outside. So it's very difficult. You don't know who actually owns the land.
He's saying you can't do private transactions.
Let me clarify as a farmer.
There is no tax in rural agriculture.
One second.
Where is the black money in agriculture?
No farmer who's willingly selling his land objects to being paid by check. Let me just tell you this. It's the company which does not want to pay white money because it wants to save on stamp duty.
Ajit Gulabchand, let's try and understand some of the basic. Let's try and lay down as we are moving hopefully towards some sort of a consensus on this. One of the things that is being laid out here, which was not there in the 1894 Act, so we should come back to it and saying, this is at least one thing which should be a criteria. Let's have a fair price that is paid. If you are forcibly taking away somebody's land, pay them a fair price, pay them a really high price, negotiate deals directly, pay the person the price for land. Land should not be a cheap commodity. I've sometimes had industrialists looking at me and saying, oh, we're going to have to pay so much more for land. But yes, India is a land scarce country. You should pay that fair price. Are you okay with that? Let's pay the fair price so long as there's not too much bureaucracy and complications.
I completely agree. Listen, paying a fair price for a man giving up his land is one thing, and having eminent domain that for a public purpose the land will have to be given up are two different things. So it's important that the price be paid is a fair and a very happy compensation. There's no question about it. The issue comes is with the other complications of permissions from so many people. You know, in India, if you go by the original bill, it would take 10 years for any land to be properly cleared. And this, if there is nobody goes to court. With so many people going to court, you're not going to get any transactions. And do not forget, we have to create those jobs in the next 20 years. Look at the enormity of the problem. We are squibbling over
so
issues
Ajit, just to understand, so Ajit, hang on. You're saying that that is a change that should have come in this bill but hasn't come.
But a lot of them have come, and which, as I said, given the circumstance, they've done a very good job in making it workable.
Okay.
Now, this
we'll debate that further. I don't want to get Shergill Reddy in, who hasn't had a chance to speak yet, Consortium of Indian Farmers. Shergill Reddy, your sense on, okay, let's now assume that 1894 one extreme, the 2013 another extreme, what the BJP has done, maybe going back to the first extreme. What sort of a compromise can we have somewhere in the middle of all of this, which makes it an acceptable bill?
Yeah. Firstly, we must understand, and we farmers accept, without industrialization, we cannot progress. I'll give you in agriculture itself, only 6-7% processed. So that we need huge investment in agro-processing industries. Now somebody like maybe some XYZ will come to invest huge money in an interior district in a state in this country. Who is going to deal with hundreds of these farmers with in different social background, political caste consideration? So therefore my submission is this bill which has been modified by and large meets the aspirations of people. Number one. I'll just take 2-3 points. Secondly, the genuineness of the project has to be done by and large by a government, and if there is a mischief, this can always be questioned. But the other main point as a farmer I look to is a very simple thing. No farmer in this country is interested in agriculture. We will be very happy to get rid of it. Now what I look to is, kindly hear me, what I look is, can I get a genuine real compensation and a rehabilitation package? These three in my view are critical, and I have a feeling that the earlier bill, of course, it was made too complex, probably not implementable as already suggested by so many people, but this has simplified. Only two suspicions happen. One is, in spite of all these rules and regulations, whether any mischief can be done by some vested interest in knocking away more than land required by them. That has to be taken care, watched by XYZ. The second is whether we farmers are getting timely rehabilitation and payment.
He is broadly saying that farmers do need industries in their areas.
But see, he's saying two things, that farmers need industries, and second thing he's saying is farming is not profitable, so they don't want to farm. But that doesn't mean you take my land away. I mean, it's not 1 + 1 is 2. It's like the Godfather movie offer. If you're making you an offer, you cannot refuse. You take it or we'll throw you out. I mean, it's that kind of a thing.
I want to say, forget about those states which is having a huge chunk of land. Today, if one farmer is having 4 sons, 1 acre land has gone 1/4. Next generation, it has got 1/16. However facilities you provide in the village, 1/16 of acre cannot be sufficient for fulfilling the entire family. So out of those 16 families, at least 12, 13 has to move to some other profession, which he was saying. The problem is, when you will block each and everything, the problem comes from where the other jobs will create. That's why there has to be a balance, proper balance.
Can I?
और आज फैक्ट ये है कि गांव में हम लोग के भी रिलेटिव्स हैं, छोटी छोटी जिनकी रह गई हैं जमीनें, वो कहते हैं फोन करके, साहब कहीं चपरासी लगवा दो मेरे बेटे, मगर it means you have to create an alternative. You have to create.
1894 के कानून को आपने 120 साल किसानों ने लड़ाई लड़ी और जनवरी में यह लागू हुआ, आपकी सरकार ने पूरे देश में बताओ अगर एक भी अधिग्रहण कराओ और तुम विकास विरोधी किसान को बता रहे हो। आप स्कूल अस्पताल की बात करो, आप आओ फ्री में दे रहे गांव का आदमी, अगर उसमें आप सहमति
आपसे मैं एक सवाल पूछना चाहूंगा। जो बात कही जा रही है, अगर हर गांव में, हर क्षेत्र में जो फैसिलिटीज होनी चाहिए, अगर उद्योग लगेगा, गांवों के पास लगेगा, तो क्या किसान नहीं चाहेंगे कि ठीक है फैक्ट्री में काम करें और कुछ काम करें?
किसान चाहेगा जी, जितना फैक्ट्री के लिए ले रहे हो उसे ले हो ना। आप अब हमारे यहाँ रिलायंस ने लिया अभी 5-6 साल पहले, जरूरत ही 500 बीघे की, और बजेड़ा खुर्द में ले ली 7,500 बीघे, तो उसका मिसयूज कर रहे हैं। अब ये रेलवे की बात कर रहे हैं, हाईवे की बात कर रहे हैं, 1 किलोमीटर इधर और 1 किलोमीटर इधर क्यों होना चाहिए? उसमें प्रॉपर्टी डीलिंग करेगी सरकार, किसान सहमति क्यों नहीं होनी चाहिए? सारी प्रॉपर्टी डीलिंग ही सरकार कर रही है, प्रॉपर्टी डीलिंग ही सरकार है, किसान के विरोधी सरकार।
आई थिंक जो सरकार ने आते ही तुरंत एकदम 2 महीने में अध्यादेश जारी कर दिया। क्या उस दिन बीजेपी के सहमति से नहीं बना था जब कांग्रेस के राज में जो बिल बना है? ये भी तो उस दिन भी तो बीजेपी की सहमति से बना था। उस दिन बीजेपी की क्या सहमति नहीं थी उसमें?
In 26, the new amendment, I just want to make one, it talks about the new amendment, expansion of industrial corridors. The 2013 Act was bare minimum acquisition. They have expanded to say 1 kilometer each side. Now that was the problem with the Yamuna Expressway. They gave the entire land to JP to earn money. When we were sticking to bare minimum, why are they expanding? Yahi problem ki baat created.
Hang on. I think what we've just heard is really the reason why you need a more informed and logical discussion on this. And I'll tell you why. Because I think in many ways what both sides are saying is correct. Yes, you do need for certain cases, you do need to acquire land for highways and expressways and industrialization and the rest of it. But it is also correct. It is also correct that what we have seen in this country since independence is time after time, vast amounts of land have been snatched away from farmers after they have paid a pittance. It has then been misused. It has been sold on to property developers, and the act has been misused. So somewhere we have to find the right balance, which is what I'm trying to arrive from all of you. Absolutely. So can I get you?
He's saying that government should play an honest broker. Past experience shown that wherever private sector has got land, they've got 5 times in excess of what is the requirement. You see example after example.
So can I
That's
ask,
what he's talking about.
So can I ask all of you? Wait a bit. Can I ask all of you? Let us therefore try and see what should be the correct way in which land acquisition should proceed. Let's set aside for a minute. 2013, let's set aside 1894, let's set aside the ordinance. Let me start with you. If you had to have a very simple premise on which land acquisition should proceed in the country, what should that be?
See, one is about the sectors. One needs to have a clarity about for what sectors land is needed most. And this consent, as Venu is also mentioning, consent must be there, whether it is 80%, 20%, 30%, but you need to take some consent. You can't just snatch away.
But you will not get consent. So now here's the issue with the consent part is, you will not necessarily get consent sometimes to build a highway or a railway or a defense project.
I see what we, let's
you can try the consent.
Yeah,
all right. Let's see what you feel.
See, you're combining two things. Public utility consent is different. Acquiring land and giving it to the private sector consent is different. I'm saying allow it for public utilities, allow it for line projects like railway lines, roads, canals.
But not for private sector.
Yes, not for private sector. For that you need consent.
Okay. Draft the bill. Just quick 2 points. What should the bill have?
Consent is fundamental. Government has to earn.
Even for for public projects.
They have to earn the trust of the farmers. इन्होंने जो बोला है इन farmers से बात करके कि ये हम करने वाले हैं, इतनी की जरूरत है, इतनी लेंगे. And one good thing that this government has come up with as part of the amendments is that one family, one employment per household, long-term employment, that creates a long-term stake. Social impact assessment, Jairam Ramesh said will take 4 years. It's not rocket science, you can finish it in 3 months. You get hold of some 200 MBAs and do it in 3 months. Yeah.
Do it in 3 months. Yeah. Ajit Gulabchand, if you had to draft something which is fair to all parties, to industry and to farmers and to the government and to public purpose, very briefly, what would that be? Because so far, I don't think anybody has got it. I don't think any of the bills so far have completely nailed it. And that's perhaps natural because you're trying to get a consensus in each case.
I think first, private transactions between two private parties must be completely excluded from the purview of this Act. Second is that a good price has got to be paid for the farmer to come up, to be paid to acquire his land. But eminent domain, where sometimes forcible acquisition is required, cannot be done away with. Even the freest country, America, has it. So I think what we need is a very fair price. Keeping people locked up with each other for years together in some form of working together is not going to work. It must be a clean transaction where a good compensation is paid when the land is acquired.
Okay, Chengal Reddy.
It is not consent, it is consultation. Okay. That should be the word, because let me tell you, it is wrong to say that farmers will oppose everything. No, nonsense. You see, you have to do consultation. You go to the village, let the officer or whoever it is go to the village, sit with the farmers, explain three basic things. Firstly, what is this project about and how it is going to benefit them in terms of employment, rehabilitation, etc. Second, how much land is required, everything, this can become in the number one point. Second is, yes, we need this land, so this is going to be my compensation, this is going to be my rehabilitation package. I think these two aspects.
Mr. Chengal Reddy, what after the consultation, what if there is no consent?
Yeah.
That is the question. After the consultation, if there is no consent. No, that's the question. After the consultation, if there is no consent, as a farmer, you're saying take farmers' land away. I mean,
criticism of 1894 was discretion to the administration. No, please don't talk about farmers. No, please, you hear me, Mr. Vikram Chandra. No, Mr. Vikram Chandra, please let me tell you, don't say anybody is going to take away land farmers. There are Supreme Court 150 number of judges. We know how to protect. Let me tell you, this land bill has come out with some specific purpose of infrastructure, industrialization, which we all welcome. The earlier one was wrong. Now here comes the question, what type of bill it should be, and you asked me, I gave you. Shall I tell you a simple thing? You are asking 80% consent. What consent? Is it landholders? I mean the real owners? Or is it the sharecroppers? Or is it the agriculture labor working? Or the people in the village sitting? What citizens of the village? Now you tell me what is this 80%, 70%? What are you going to do? Who is going to
consent has to be of let's get back to drafting. Let's get back to drafting.
Consent from whom? Okay. No, I am not saying anything. Now you decide. Consent from whom? Is it from the owners of the land? Is it from the tenants?
I'm glad you're leaving it to me to decide. Unfortunately, I'm not.
You tell us. We are willing to listen.
No, the three clauses,
willing to listen but not give consent.
I want to make one point. I can decide on what it should be. Then fine, we'll may get somewhere eventually.
Three clauses that have to be there in this consensus bill. The biggest criticism of 1894, discretion with the administration. So consent has to be there, rehabilitation, assessment of a fair value and timely payment of fair value. Now, is the right of the farmer balanced with the industry? This amendment is on an erroneous presumption that farmers' land is a hindrance to infrastructure. No. Secondly, it was a comprehensive web 2013. So, Janchu, a factual correction, section 40 subclause 1 says acquisition can be done for defense or national security or for emergency. So, 10A is already captured in section 41. So, this is an artificial way to get other categories of infrastructure in the name of defense and national security.
India's land is the most expensive in the world, bar none, when it's measured by local income, right? So
but that's not, hang on, but that's not necessarily wrong. For the simple reason, when you look at the population to land ratio,
well, it's
India
not just about density. I mean, India
has 16% of the world's population and a fraction of the world's land. So land should be the most expensive in India.
Land is expensive, but the other reason for it is that India does not really have a land market that's functional. Only small amounts of the land actually is able to be purchased.
So you're saying if you fix the land market,
you've got to create a land market.
That may also be correct, actually. Now, you had to do it all over again. You spent a lot of time drafting the 2013, but if you had to do it all over again, you didn't have compulsions of various people telling you what to do. What are the changes you'd make?
Look, it's very easy to, now we stand here with the benefit of hindsight, of course, and we can make multiple changes. But we spent over 2 years, every single day, consulting with the people who had a stake in acquisition, both sides, industry as well as farmers, as well as other people who didn't own land but were dependent on the land for their livelihood. This bill represents a grand compromise. There's something that Jairam Sir would consistently tell us. There are many clauses that we toyed with and we ultimately ended up dropping, which were very good. but you couldn't keep them in the bill because for various reasons they couldn't work. It's like putting together, various cogs in a wheel. Sometimes the wheels don't turn with one particular cog. So Jairam sir would always tell us, guys, don't make best the enemy of good. If you can get a good bill, remember, you're trying to overturn something that's 120 years old. If you can get a good bill, a good working bill, stick with that. And this bill, though not ideal, and we will be the first to admit its flaws, represents, I think, the very best effort under the circumstances.
Okay. Sudhanshu, can I ask you that? And then I want to come back to the audience and to return to all of you. At the end of the day, in reversing the 2013 bill, which actually was the product, as he's saying, of a considerable period of efforts to get a consensus and 2 years of consultation and standing committee of which Sumitra Mahajan was there. Sushma Swaraj herself played a role in getting it through Parliament. Many people were involved. Was it done in too hasty a manner? Ordnance suddenly coming out saying we are reversing all of this, and instead, should there not have been a similar period of consultation where we could have done like what we're trying to do in this show? Talk to many people, try to figure it out and think, okay, let's do this, let's not do this, let's try and fix what is actually wrong with it. Maybe you would have had more success in doing it that way.
Which they're doing now.
Which you're doing now, but perhaps you thought in the flash when
I want to make it very clear that we have not provided any concession to any private landowner, any private company which want to acquire the land. The only concessions are provided for the government projects and the public-private partnership in which the ownership is with the government.
Private companies to private
in which the ownership is government. Let me complete. And on the political side, whatever he was saying is correct. There is a sense of suspicion between the farmers and the government. So government should have an honesty while acquiring a land.
But
our opponents, I would like to say one political sentence. The left parties, what they have done in Singur Nandigram, the BSP, what they have done in Tappal, what the Samajwadi Party has done in Bhatta Parsol, these type of events, and the Congress Party, forget about the company they have taken for their own family purpose. So what happens? That created a mistrust and dishonesty, the concept of dishonesty in the mind of farmers. So government should be honest while acquiring the land. Then confidence will build up between the farmers and the government.
Yes, but can I tell you what some of the errors of pushing it through in a hurry are? There are certain major flaws that are there in the ordinance, which I'm not sure which even your party has fully applied its mind to try and understand. I'll just give you one small example. For example, the retrospective clause which was spoken about at great length, I'll ask you a simple question. Suppose as a farmer whose land was acquired in 1955, possession was never taken from him, compensation was never paid to him, but the matter has been lingering in some court somewhere. Should that farmer's land be taken away now, or should the process start again? What do you feel?
Obviously, it has to be after the legal process is complete.
You have now just in the ordinance repealed that completely and said that in that case, that farmer and hundreds and thousands of farmers will stay in limbo for all time to come.
One major change in that.
And this is a serious issue. So I think that's just one example, Sudhanshu, the sort of flaws that need to be addressed.
Supreme Court also in that. To add on to your point.
Supreme Court, there have been 8 rulings in the last year which are now being...
They said compensation paid means in the account of the farmer or in the court. They've changed it to say designated account, and the word designated account is not defined anywhere.
So for 40 years, the farmer may have never got the payment, but his land is now suddenly gone. It's
designated account was because some of the farmers are not having bank account. Then they should tell, and there are 4 or 5 members of the family. Then you have to decide whose account it should be given.
By the Supreme Court, a compensation paid means in the court or in the account. If the farmer doesn't have account, pay it in the court. You have completely overruled that to say
more problem for the farmer that he should run to the court and other things for just some small amount of compensation.
I think the way government hurriedly pushed the ordinance, there is a huge trust deficit about the government, and that has created a lot of problems. Even if you come up with lots of amendments, still this trust deficit is going to be very high among the farmers. That, I think, is the big problem.
No, the hurried it was not an hurriedness on the part of the BJP. It was after the 67 years, in the last 6 months they realized to change this amendment. This was a hurry just before elections to get something out of it. Otherwise, why you kept on listening to me? After 67 years, and you had never felt that.
Mr. Venkaiah Naidu talked about the all-party meeting. I want to ask him why that all-party meeting still has not happened. Why do they want to bulldoze over the opposition?
Okay.
Why is there no consultative process?
Let me take a break at this point. I want to get the audience in and see what they make of all of this.
There is an indecent haste.
That's when we return. 2 minutes. Welcome Welcome back to the big fight, and it's the continuing big fight over land acquisition and what should actually happen to it. And I suspect this is one of those really major tussles which it is going to take time to sort out. And it's important that we get this right because it is a very major emotive issue and yet something that is so crucial for the development of the country. Let me turn to the audience now. Who has a view? Yeah.
Through private sector, the government is trying to build up professions for the people.
Okay. Fine. So then that's where the people benefit. The gentleman there.
Don't you think that development should be woven around the people, not the people around the development? That I want to ask to you.
Weave the development around the people. Okay, the gentleman there.
मैं पूछना चाहूंगा सुधांशु जी से कि जैसे इन्होंने बताया कि यहाँ बसपा के राज में भट्टा पारसोल में अधिग्रहण हुआ, वहाँ बंगाल में हुआ, तो उसके लिए जो किसान उस टाइम पे उन्होंने धरना प्रदर्शन हुआ, उन्होंने पीड़ा हुई तो उन्होंने धरना प्रदर्शन करे, उनके लिए आपने क्या प्रोग्रेस सोची है, क्या बनाया है कि जो उन किसानों को भी इसका लाभ मिले?
ओके, आपको कुछ कहना है?
मैं सुधांशु जी से एक प्रश्न पूछना चाहूंगा, जो ये हाईवे बन रहे हैं, इसके 1 किलोमीटर जमीन जो ली जा रही है, इसका क्या यूज है?
I would like to raise a simple question that why don't you instead provide them agricultural facilities so that they can produce further and take this occupation as the major agricultural
Because at the end of the day,
production.
India can't entirely be an agrarian society. It doesn't happen anywhere that you have 70% of the population in agriculture. Okay, final quick words from anybody. Where are we going to move on this right now? Chengal Reddy, why don't I start with you? What should happen next?
It should get through, and then we hope whatever it is, we will see over a period of time if there are any problems that can be sorted out by the government.
Maybe that's one way to go. Ajit Gulabchand, last quick thoughts. What happens next?
I think get through with the bill. The government has done the right thing to push it through. There's urgency. Huge number of jobs have to be created. We can't wait to begin.
Okay.
And if it's still possible, remove the private sector from it altogether.
Vikram, I would say wider consultation among political parties. This, the way all other legislations takes place, that process
Have
should
that
be,
consultation, then emerge at a consensus. Mr. Jaiveer.
I think you need farmers' consent to take a farmer's piece of land. Simply put, everything is hogwash. Everything else is hogwash.
Okay,
Vikram, consent must be brought back, wider consultation. And the other thing is, this government is already overtaken by their own state governments. Like the Haryana Chief Minister is on record that he is going to acquire by taking consent and he is not going to do multi-crop land.
2013 Act stays as it is. Don't bring back the ghost of 1894 law. That's all I have to say.
Modi's honeymoon is over. Is this his Waterloo? I think this is an important issue. Can he get it done? Should he get it done? I think it's a seminal moment for the Modi government.
Okay.
The real problem is land titling. Come out with a better law on land titling, come out with a better regime for land records.
If you actually had much better land titles, everything was online, everything was easy to buy,
Conclusive.
maybe then acquisition would not be required at all.
Acquisition would still be required. It is required in America, it's required
It will
in
be required
Europe.
for eminent domain, but you as an industrialist may not need it that much if you had proper records.
You will not need it because today we are the only country which does not give you guarantee. Though government keeps records of lands, they cannot give. The risk of buying the land is on the buyer, which I think has to change. And second is there's too much differentiation between agricultural land and non-agriculture, which is where the trouble begins. So I think the land must be land and well records are maintained, computerized records, easily available, and title guarantees must be given by government. A lot of things will change.
Okay, Sudhanshu, in addition, some of the innovative new ways in which you might not actually need the land, need forcible acquisition that much. Private parties negotiating and coming up with a fair price, and then they are kept out of the land acquisition completely. That's suggestion number one.
Leasing.
Suggestion number two is leasing, which again people may not have any great objection to. Suggestion number three is have a proper way in which there are titles which then the government can sign off on.
Defined.
Proper titles, so then the industry can come and say, I can buy 100 acres and set up my factory, but I'm not that concerned. I don't have to negotiate with 20,000 people and do a reference checks on each one of them and then have court cases which linger on
And
forever.
evaluation of surplus land.
And the utilization of surplus land. So there are at least 4 or 5 other possible suggestions which perhaps can also be looked at.
Definitely all these suggestions are quite noteworthy, whether it is a proper title of the land or the amount of the surplus land or the lease aspect, and what he was saying that it should be for the rural infrastructure, should be given prime concern. And lastly, I would like to say, इस देश के किसान ने जरूरत पड़ने पे अपने बेटे भी दिए हैं देश के लिए और जमीन भी दी है. समस्या वहां हुई थी जब अविश्वास पैदा हुआ।
जमीन अदानी को नहीं देना चाहते?
नहीं, मैं इसीलिए समस्या वहां पैदा हुई।
जमीन अदानी को नहीं देना चाहते?
मैं उसी पे
आपने नहीं
अरे मैं वही कह रहा हूं।
There has to be a parameter method for snatching their land.
समस्या वहां पैदा हुई जहां अविश्वास पैदा हुआ। तो ये विश्वास पैदा करना सरकार का दायित्व है और राज्य सरकारों का दायित्व है। हमें विकास भी चाहिए, किसान का हित भी चाहिए। एक वाक्य में कहना चाहूंगा कि साईं इतना दीजिए जामे कुटुंब समाए, मैं भी भूखा ना रहूं साधु ना भूखा।
तो कुछ तो किसान को दीजिए,
इसलिए ये
दायित्व उनसे ले रहे हैं, कुछ तो उनको दीजिए।
और भाई आपने क्या दिया था 67 साल में सारी?
For a moment I thought we almost had some sort of an agreement on the path ahead, but obviously we don't. So I'm going to call an end to this episode of The Big Fight. We'll be back with a lot more. Okay, now this is generating into an all-out. I'm trying to end the show. We'll continue this discussion after it's over. I suspect this being such an emotive issue, we'll go on debating it for months altogether, and let's see what actually happens in the Rajya Sabha. You're watching The Big Fight. We'll be back soon.